So, just to start out, is the lead poem in The Mystery of Horses, and it's called My Topic Sentence. My square-hemmed shirt has coconut shell buttons, splashes of blue sky and puffy clouds, spidery coconut palms wave zaggedy fronds washed with emerald, curlicue ironwork porches, filigree balconies. I don't tuck it in. So 7 palm beachers parade around the front and back, their triple chin faces wrinkled like baked eggplants. It's hard to see where they leave off and their cat-eye glasses spray up at the temples like birds of paradise feathers. 2 women wear smocks, tights, berets, leotards. 2 wear pedal pushers. The tall, skinny one has a ball-fringed bolero top and a pink, flat-brimmed hat like a chowder dish. She palms the bald head of a short, fat man in pince-nez. She slinkies with her tummy pushed forward, pointing her ballet slippers like she's Maria Tallchief. Their canaries fly left. The man with lavender lips has walnut knees, no chocolate bangle bracelets, but a big gold watch. Curly poodles snoot out one blue Afghan, squiggled dogs, and jiggly people. And I had this shirt. It was, I owned it. I was asked if I still had it, and I wept because I didn't. 3 days steady, I wear my shirt. I won't take it off. And I write my essay to say at school because my father bought my shirt from Tampa. I will tell my class, Miss Peters' 3rd grade room, that Ronald Searle painted this, but it is winter. My mother's in the hospital, dying. I sit by the fire in my new shirt, drawing with pastels, dust all over. My father sits in his red velvet chair reading Punch. He says something I don't hear. I'm out of hand's reach, but he hooks his cane into my collar and yanks me to him, ripping my shirt, pastels flying. My father slaps me. What I've said or done, I don't know, but I'll make it up. How many people here had A.A. Milne when they were kids? So you're familiar with When We Were Very Young?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, right. That's good. Well, there's a poem in there called Disobedience, which you may remember, which starts out James, Morrison, Weatherby George Dupree, took great care of his mother, though he was only 3. James said to his mother, Mother, he said, you must never go down to the end of town if you don't go down with me. Now you will remember that the mother disappears. This is called When We Were Very Young. I'm not now. Now I'm 8, and I'm looking straight ahead at the windshield wipers, but not. Whoop, whoop. That sound. My dad's driving me home. I'm scared he's going to ask what happened, so I have to figure out what to say. I can feel myself getting cold. He drums his fingers of his right hand on the steering wheel. That's the hand. I do stuff. It just comes over me. And then I have to explain, and I can't, and more bad things happen, so I do something else, and then I just have to get things fixed so I could do more. It's like when I started borrowing money off my dad's desk. I was always going to pay it back, but I lost track, and then I had to take some from somewhere else to make up, but they haven't found out about that yet. I get to where I'm not sure what I've said about what. Bad things build up, and more bad things come out of the blue. I look away a second, and they happen. So I watch a lot. I can look sideways, but not show I'm looking. I know Dad's watching me, then watching the slippery road, like he's going to ask what happened at the Bickles, but worries about the storm. He takes a breath like he's starting, so I open the window, and the wet blows all over the new seats, and he yells at me to shut and stop messing around. But he hasn't asked. I stopped it. I hope maybe Mrs. Bickle didn't tell him, but probably she did. The bad thing is that it looks like he's been crying. He's breathing faster, too. I got sent to live with the Bickles, but 2 weeks there, and I loved it. It was the first time I wanted to stay away. It wasn't like the Stecks, the Chattertons, the Peters, and someplace else I can't remember. All the places I got sent before. I only ever found out later that my mom or my dad had been sick. And that was because somebody goofed up and said in front of me, and I know they weren't supposed to. So my parents got sick a lot. From the way nobody said, I kind of got the idea maybe I had something to do with it. And I used to want to get back home and make things work out. But this time, the first time, I really didn't want to go back. I wanted to stay where I was. I hadn't peed in my bed once at the Bickles. I'd been in trouble a lot at home for doing that. But it just didn't happen this time. But I messed up another way. Mrs. Bickle knew my mom from the church sewing circle, the North Greenwich Congregational Church. The Bickles had a Chevy Woody wagon, and I could get in with sandy feet, and they let me have pizza at the beach, and they let me watch anything on the television. My dad hated TV, and he never got to watch it except the nature programs once on Walt Disney. We didn't have a set. Mrs. Bickle's husband, Jacob, and I could call him that, and I could call her Edie, ran the grounds and the gardens for St. Luke's Convalescent Hospital out in the country near our church. Jacob carried me on his shoulders and showed me all the places I could explore, and the beehives and the pigeon house and everywhere, but warned me not to go on the islands and the ponds where the swans had eggs. He knew all the butterflies we saw, and he wrote them down for me, so I had a list to take home, and we practiced. Eastern tiger swallowtails by the fen, Baltimore's, Dion skippers, Aphrodite fritillary, and what he called a rare gossamer, a Hessel's hair streak. He taught me how to say. And he asked me names of trees my mom had taught me. He pointed out the milkweed field he'd reclaimed behind his greenhouses. Mostly, it was just best being carried, and I didn't get in trouble. Happy, their basset hound came with and scouted for rabbits. Then it was over. Quick, like it never happened. My father was coming to get me at noon. 2 weeks, like nothing. I'd come to Jacob and Edie's because my mom was home one day and then she wasn't. I'd ridden my bike out the way I did, going wherever I wanted, and was digging for fossils where I'd found a trilobite in a lot near home. And when I came back for lunch, she was gone. My dad was there instead and was mad at me when I asked about Mom. He said, "Don't ask so much." I needed to know where she was, but he took me to the Bickles. Then I got a postcard with a picture of the United Hospital from my mom saying, "Just resting, we'll be home soon, be good, love, Mother." So, I knew. They did take me to see her, and it was true. She wasn't hiding from me at home. At first, they didn't say where. I think Jacob wanted to, but when he parked the Woody behind the old wing of United, I saw the sign. Edie said, "Now don't be surprised about how your mom looks. She's going to be okay. They think they've gotten it all." I started to ask, but Jacob shushed Edie, and she scooped up my right hand. He took my left and asked me, "What kind of trees are those over there?" And I said, "Dogwoods." And then he lifted me. They lifted me, hop, hop, over and through a hedge of pink azaleas to a lawn at the side of the wing. They said the hospital wouldn't let kids visit so young, but I could see my mom from the outside, so I wouldn't disturb her. She was 5 floors up and stood at a window with Dad and waved. There was a nurse Mom was leaning on. She wasn't leaning on Dad. The nurse wore a white hat like a fat seagull nesting on her head. I could see there were tubes coming out of both Mom's arms, and her nose and her hair was down, not in the bun she usually wore with all the hairpins. She had on a long white gown. I said it was like that big jellyfish with streamer tentacles at the New York Aquarium. Edie said, "That is not nice to say. Your mother's been very, very sick, and you must be good or bad things might happen." Jacob picked me up quickly and said, "How about an ice cream at Nelson's, bub?" And I rode back to the car on his shoulders. That last morning, Jacob squeezed me with a big hug and kissed my forehead before he went to work. I packed and unpacked and packed again. He didn't want to leave, and I did. I knew if I went home, I'd do something bad. It had got to where I always did, and then bad things would happen to Mom. I still couldn't sit still. I know Edie was watching me, so I pretended to read an old book magazine, the one with Desi and Lucy and the kids on the cover, all happy, and the question, "How hellish is the H-bomb?" printed over red at the bottom. "It's a big worry," Jacob said to Edie at breakfast. She said, "Everybody's on edge." I could feel how they were nervous all of a sudden. Finally, I had everything packed and ready in my Greenwich YMCA gym bag, and I said goodbye to my room and went downstairs. That's all I ever took to those places they sent me. My dad said, "Never burden people. They don't want to see all your old junk. That's why I don't ask people things, so I don't burden them." I went outside and tried to help Edie hang wet clothes, but she said she was fine. She sent me to play in the birch grove behind the houses. She said, "Happy's waiting." Mid-morning, it was May. The sheets were like they might fly away, but it was hot, but all the lilac smells came up from the hospital gardens to us on the hill. I went to the birch grove, but Happy wasn't there. I thought maybe he didn't want to see me, and I started to cry. Happy was the kindest and best dog. He was my squire. I was his knight, because the winter before, my father read us about King Arthur, and a squire never sees his knight cry. Maybe that's why what happened did, because I couldn't stop crying, and somebody might see and know I'd done something bad, and then that would make more things happen. It's just the things built up. Next to the birch grove, Jacob had built what he called a pergola. The grapes had bloomed, and now there were just heaps of tiny, hard baby grapes in the light. That's where I found Happy. I thought, nothing bad can happen. But I felt like I was going to explode. Happy turned toward me with that harumph shift around he did, looking up. He must have known I was crying. Happy always knew. If I came into lunch and Edie and Jacob stopped talking and I'd spin around and leave because they knew they were talking about me, Happy would get up and waddle out to lie on my feet. When my father called and Edie told me he didn't have time to speak to me, Happy came over. I tried to make sure nothing showed, but he always knew. I think Happy loved me, though I'd only known him 2 weeks. He'd lope to me most mornings, settle in my way as if to screw himself down, rocking back and forth and around. His ears always swayed, and he'd whack his tail like the metronome on our piano, counting to keep time. He'd wave his head, ears all flappy, look up sideways, and we'd go on quest. I shifted from foot to foot. I couldn't stop crying, so I mashed my face against my arm so he couldn't see. But Happy shifted every time I moved and tried to turn away from him. He made that little squeak moan sound. When I bent down to pick up his chain, he lapped my hand. He had a stake and a chain there in the shade, but I thought the chain hurt him, so I never used it. I couldn't stand for him to see me. I tied him with a scrap of twine I always kept in my pocket. I said, "Happy, I can't see you anymore." I started crying harder. Everything got blurry. He whimpered. I coiled his chain loosely to put it away, like a lariat. Instead, I gradually swung the clip higher, wider, whirled it over my head like a helicopter. Whoop-a, 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 whoop, ripping hard grapes above us, angled it, and suddenly down, whipped him again and again. I don't remember if Happy made a sound. I blanked like I always did. I heard nothing but my breath and my heart. I can't remember when I stopped. It must have been soon because I didn't see any blood when I came to. But I don't know, even now. I heard the sprinkler lap, slap, slap. I do know Happy must have choked away until the twine snapped because he was gone when I came to. I smelled the lilacs. Then I heard him howl. I heard a rustle, the clatter of dropped clothespins, quick steps. Looking up, I saw Mrs. Bickle watching me through the grapevines. She didn't say anything. Maybe I only hit him once, or only thought I did. Maybe I only whipped the ground. And then my dad came to take me home. He was early, so maybe Mrs. Bickle called him. He didn't say much to me, just told me to get my bag and get in the car. But that was pretty much the way it always was, so I couldn't guess if he knew. What did she tell him? She must have. He talked a few minutes with Mrs. Bickle, and they looked back at me in the car. Maybe that's when she said it, if she did, but I couldn't be sure. Then we drove off. I kept my head down and wouldn't wave, but I think she waved at me. I don't know where Happy was. So here we are again. I hear the wind catch the convertible canvas, and it lifts, whoop, whoop, and the wipers. Sooner or later, everybody will hear it. Somebody's going to set me down and ask, and then I'll have to say. That's what my dad says about people at the office. He has to set them down, and then they say. That's the thing that's worse than anything. But they haven't yet. I'll say, I don't know. That's what I'll say. Something just happens, and I go blank. Now the voice in my head starts in. It just won't stop. I haven't told you about this because it's really the worst of worst. The voice starts in over and over. You don't blank. You're a liar. You do it on purpose. Remember, Jeannie? That was an accident. You meant to kill her. No, I didn't. I didn't. You caused all this because you're bad, and that's why your mom's so sick. Didn't. I don't remember. It's all blank. When I turned 6, it was December after the first snow. Only a few inches, but enough. I got to be king of the hill, but Jeannie and her friends were attacking. They were bigger. I couldn't keep them off, and I grabbed for more snow and some slush to put together a really good one. This was at the time just after my dad's leg was taken off and he had a heart attack. They finally told me. I'd seen him slumped and white being dragged into the house by 2 strangers. Our house was upside down and Dad was sleeping in the dining room. I was always in trouble and I never knew for what. Things would build up and build up. I'd tell the voice. Maybe I knew there was a rock in the middle. Maybe I didn't. Jeannie's father came to our house. I was hiding at the top of the stairs. He told my mom and dad they'd had to take Jeannie to the hospital and she was all bloody and she had to have stitches on her face and she'd be marked for life. I yelled down, I didn't know! I didn't do it on purpose! They stopped talking and looked up at me, silent, then turned away. My dad made shushing moves with his hand. He didn't. But I did. I knew there was a rock. I remember seeing it and split second decided. My dad may be thinking about this. He's brought it up a few times, but he doesn't really look at me. Gives his head that one little shake and doesn't say more. Dad holds the wheel with one hand and reaches back and pulls out his handkerchief. He blows his nose, puts his handkerchief back. He says, when we get home, don't make noise. Your mother's resting. That's when I know he's been crying, and I can't stand that. But he won't ask. I know he won't ask now. That's the scary part, the really scary part if it comes out. The voice says, that's when my mom will die. When people find out what I've done, I have to watch very closely so that can't happen.